Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Lara.
I'm Krista.
And I'm Kayla.
We are back for part 2 of Michelle Martinko's case. If you haven't listened to part 1, go listen to that right now and then come back and hear how this all ends. When we left off in part 1, we had just talked about how Denlinger found out about Parabon Nanolabs and decided that maybe could crack their case. So in July 2018, Detective Denlinger got the call that he was waiting for. Parabon reported that they had found a familial DNA match in GEDmatch, a relative of whoever did this to Michelle. It wasn't a close relative, but it was a starting point. The name provided was Brandy Jennings. She was a 40-year-old woman living in Vancouver, Washington. She was identified as something like a second cousin, once or twice removed. So big family tree still. Brandy had no idea that her recreational DNA test would have law enforcement implications. And in fact, she later said she'd simply uploaded her DNA profile to GEDmatch while researching her father's side of the family. And actually, she'd forgotten about it at that point. Now, out of the blue, detectives informed her that her DNA had helped lead them to a killer. Talk about an unexpected branch of that family tree.
Yeah.
That would be wild to get that call.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Hey,
Totally.
based on your DNA results, you're related to someone who's probably a murderer. Can we get some records from you?
Yeah.
Be like, how close?
How
Is this someone I know?
Someone that lives in the vicinity. Like, what are we talking? The detective and a small team began the painstaking task of building out Brandy's family tree, but in reverse. They went up her ancestry and then back down other branches to try to find male relatives of the right age and location. They dug into her genealogy from birth dates, death certificates, marriage licenses, even gravestone inscriptions.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, it would be a cool job to
think
try
that
to
would be
build
really
that
cool.
out. Yeah.
It always reminds me, I see like a game all the time. It's like, okay, this person's related to this person and put them in your tree where they go. Like, that
Mhm.
looks very interesting.
Yeah.
Totally. That's like a job for these
I
people,
know.
right?
That's so cool.
Hey, it's never too late to change lanes, Laura.
Maybe one day.
It was a massive puzzle that they were putting together. Effectively, they were looking for a common ancestor between Brandy and this unknown suspect, and then mapping all the descendants of that ancestor. This process took several months of dedicated detective work. Denlinger joked that he used anything he could find on the internet to fill in the blanks. This was not some quick computer algorithm, but rather a very human, very meticulous research project. As more distant relatives of Brandy's family cooperated and provided their DNA for comparison, it really helped fill in the pieces of this puzzle. Eventually, by fall of 2018, the investigators had zeroed in on one particular branch of Brandy's family that led straight to Iowa. Parabon's genealogists recalibrated their analysis with the new information and told Denlinger that the best odds pointed to 3 brothers in Iowa. These 3 brothers were the Burns brothers. We have Donald, Kenneth, and Jerry. All 3 men were natives of Iowa, and crucially, all 3 were alive and well in 2018.
This isn't the same Ken Burns who makes like documentaries, right?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That would be pretty wild, though, right?
Yeah.
Detective Denlinger was floored that after 38 years, the tangled web of DNA led right back to a trio of brothers living practically in Cedar Rapids' backyards. He said a 38-year trail was heading straight back home, 20 minutes away from us. The Burns brothers lived in Manchester, Iowa at that time, which is roughly 20 to 30 minutes away from Cedar Rapids.
Oh, wow.
Real close.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of crazy to stay in the area.
Yeah.
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 I mean,
no big deal.
Right?
I mean, they've gone this long, so they probably think they're in the clear.
Oh, absolutely. You would think you've gotten away with it for good.
Yeah.
Denlinger was obviously excited, but he had to proceed very carefully. Genetic genealogy can suggest likely suspects, But police still needed direct evidence to definitively match one of the brothers to the crime scene DNA. And since they didn't know which brother was the source, they effectively had 3 simultaneous persons of interest. Discrete surveillance was set up to gather each brother's DNA without tipping them off. Denlinger noted, "Not only can I not tell any of the 3, but I was careful who I told in general. Iowa is not the biggest state, and you never know who knows who." He didn't want word getting back to the Burnses that the police were sniffing around. The plan unfolded over the next few weeks in October 2018, and it kind of feels like something out of a spy novel or maybe a CSI episode. I don't know. Investigators tailed one of the brothers, Donald, to a lunch outing. After he finished eating, they took the straw from his drink that he had thrown in the garbage. For the second brother, Kenneth, they managed to collect a toothbrush from his garbage.
Oh,
Yep. They probably had to wait till his trash was out on the curb and then discreetly retrieve it for evidence. And then there was the third brother, Jerry. Denlinger and a team drove to a small mall in Manchester, Iowa, where Jerry, who was 64 at the time, lived and ran a small powder coating business. They observed his routine, and after a couple of hours of scouting, they spotted that Jerry was having lunch at a pizza restaurant. As luck would have it, Jerry drank multiple sodas through a plastic straw while eating. When he left, detectives moved in and collected the straw from the table or the trash. Not entirely sure, but
you would hope it was from the table.
I know.
Like, I think it was this one.
Right. You'd have to be really
Certain.
Mm-hmm. And also going there as soon as he leaves without him noticing that you're now going through the trash.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and making sure no one else threw anything in that trash in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. All 3 brothers' DNA samples were rushed to the state crime lab for comparison against the crime scene profile. The results came back. The outcome was crystal clear. Donald and Kenneth were not a match, but Jerry Burns' DNA was an exact match to the profile from Michelle's dress and her car.
Oh, wow.
And statistically, the odds of a match belonging to anyone other than the killer are astronomical. One analysis puts it at less than 1 in 100 billion.
Wow.
In other words, Jerry was the man who had left his blood at the crime scene in 1979.
How old was he at this point?
He's 64.
Okay.
And we said that was 38 years ago. So he'd been in his 20s.
Yeah.
Detective Denlinger was nearly speechless at the confirmation. After nearly 4 decades, they finally had a name and face for the phantom who had haunted this case. They realized the Parabon snapshot composite from 2017 did bear a strong resemblance to a younger Jerry.
That's so cool.
Yes.
They can get those and how good they look.
Absolutely. Side-by-side comparisons of Jerry's old photos with the DNA-generated sketch were strikingly similar in features, and it showed them that the science worked better than anyone had even dared hope. Yet, along with the triumph came a baffling revelation. Jerry Lynn Burns was, on the surface, an unlikely suspect for such a vicious crime. In 2018, like we said, he was 64 years old. He was a husband, father of 3. He was a well-known local businessman in Manchester. He had no criminal record to speak of.
Wow.
That's like so much more scary.
Right?
Like, it could be anybody. Yeah.
That's how I always feel too with these DNA cases so far in the future.
Yeah.
And like they don't have a continued criminal record that we know of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I was thinking too, if the picture had such a strong resemblance to him and he was still living there, how did someone not recognize him? But maybe someone was like, oh, that kind of looks like Jerry, but
Couldn't be
that's
Jerry.
not him.
Yeah.
Like he is a good
Exactly.
guy. He's got a family. You know, maybe they didn't put 2 and 2 together because he had never done anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also the DNA snapshot wasn't made till 2017. So
Yeah.
he would have been like 63 and not looked like it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But even if, a childhood friend,
Mhm.
someone could have seen it and recognized him.
Yeah.
Oh, that kind of looks like him. But
Mhm.
Yep.
no way.
Right.
There's no way that's him. He's
No,
never
he's a
done
great
anything.
guy.
Yeah.
Exactly. He had several businesses. He had a truck stop. He had his powder coating shop. He really was a great community member, At one point, he'd worked for the John Deere Company, which is a solid job in Iowa. His wife had tragically died by suicide in 2008, but Jerry had been the rock for his family, continuing to be there for all of them. To those around him, nothing screamed violent killer. As his defense attorney would later put it, there was no connection between Jerry and Michelle Martinko. None. It seemed inconceivable that this Manchester family man could be the one who had killed an 18-year-old girl in a parking lot in 1979. But as we know, DNA does not lie, and the investigators knew based on that they had their man.
Was that kind of reminds me of, I think, Robin? Didn't he just commit that one crime and then went on to just lead a normal life?
That we know of, yeah.
That we know of, yeah.
Yep.
There's a lot of
married
them.
with kids. Yeah. I mean, even in Nancy's case, like his family didn't think he was the stand-up guy, but they also had no idea that he could have killed someone.
Yeah.
And as far as we know, that was the only one.
Gosh.
Well, Christine, too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that.
Yeah. Which is
That
terrifying.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, detectives had to get Jerry to talk, or at least to react. Detective Denlinger decided to make the arrest as impactful as possible. He chose a very meaningful date to confront Jerry, December 19th, 2018, which was exactly 39 years to the day since Michelle's murder. He was hoping that the date would rattle him. Maybe it would trigger some sign of conscience, or at least make his memory, react at some point in the conversation. On December 19th, officers approached Jerry at his business, Advanced Coding Concepts in Manchester. Denlinger walked in and greeted Jerry casually. Hey, how are you today? Jerry, my name's Matt with the Cedar Rapids Police Department. It was a polite Midwestern introduction that really didn't give away the seriousness of their visit. Unknown to Burns, the detective had a hidden camera inside a coffee mug he was carrying. And I've watched the interview. It's pretty wild. Like, you just don't see it.
Yeah.
And he really doesn't give anything away.
That's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been 34 years.
39.
Yeah. So I'm
How can
sure-
you ever not have that sitting in the back of your mind, you
Right?
know?
Yeah.
Like what you did?
Seriously, it would take some serious mental gymnastics at the very least, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In the first minutes of their interview, Burns did not know that they had anything on him. To him, it probably seemed like an odd surprise visit by some out-of-town cops. Denlinger began with small talk and then explained, we're following up on an old case, a homicide that happened at Westdale Mall. He asked if Jerry had heard about it in the news over the years, and Jerry said he hadn't. As the gentle interview unfolded, Denlinger pulled out something interesting, the Parabon snapshot composite images from 2017, which showed the predicted face of the suspect generated from DNA. He showed them to Jerry. Burns looked at the images of this generic male face, which now we know was him, and reportedly quipped, boy, it looks a lot different than I look in the mirror. Trying to be humorous and self-deprecating, and also as if to say that couldn't be me. One can only imagine Detective Denlinger's inner reaction. If you only knew, Jerry. Moments later, the tone shifted. Investigators handed Jerry a warrant for a sample of his DNA. And this was it, the reveal. Denlinger broke it down bluntly. The reality is, we're not here on a whim. We're here to confirm what we already know. He told Burns, calmly, casually, he informed Jerry that they had already obtained his DNA from an item that he had left, and that it matched DNA from the crime scene. In other words, we have your number, Jerry.
Did he offer to provide his DNA or did he say no?
He can't say no.
Yeah, they have a
But
warrant.
when they initially asked, was he resistant to it?
He was a little bit, but
Can't really when.
kind of very flat affect.
Okay.
No outburst like, what are you talking about? That's impossible. It couldn't have been me. It was just evasive, but also flat.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Denlinger added almost conversationally that people throw stuff away all the time and don't realize what it can be used for. It was kind of his way of saying, you left your DNA and we already found it and tested it and know that it's a match.
Is that something that could be used in court, or would they have to use the warrant issued DNA in court?
They would use the warrant issued DNA because somebody could claim, it wasn't his DNA. It was someone else who had thrown away a same type cup or something.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So they pretty much always get a DNA sample after they already know.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Denlinger later testified that Burns never denied it during their exchange. Instead of clear denial, Jerry's answers were vague. When asked point blank to explain how his DNA could be at the crime scene, Burns really played dumb. He said, I don't know. Test it and see if it is a match. Almost challenging detectives to prove it. Denlinger pressed, No, we already did. How would it have been there, Jerry? And Jerry simply repeated, I don't know. At one point, Denlinger expressed skepticism that Jerry could possibly have forgotten being at the mall the night of the murder. What I don't believe is that you don't remember being there that night, the detective said, noting Jerry's reluctance to explain why he was there. Burns responded strangely, if I was there, I don't know. As far as I know, I was not there.
It's an odd response.
Yeah. It was not a direct, I wasn't there, I didn't do it. It was more like a hypothetical. If I was there, I have no memory of being there.
I mean, devil's advocate, it was 39 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know every date I was at a mall. But if you're the murderer, you would remember murdering her. But
yeah,
trying to play it cool, like I might have been at the mall. I don't know. It was 39 years ago.
And it's like you have blood on her dress and in her car. So you were at the mall and you were bleeding in someone else's car and you don't remember that? I don't know. It's weird. Throughout their back and forth, Burns continued to doubt or deflect everything the investigator said. But he offered no alternate explanation for the DNA. He didn't say, I loaned my car to someone, or maybe I cut myself at the mall that week. He provided literally nothing that could explain away the forensic evidence linking him to Michelle's murder.
Just pleading the fifth. I don't know. Just
kind of.
Not going to answer. Yep.
I mean, that's the typical response. I don't recall.
Yes.
After about 40 minutes of this back and forth, detectives had heard enough. They placed Jerry Burns under arrest for the first-degree murder of Michelle Martinko, exactly 39 years to the day after her life was taken. Burns was read his rights, and the date, December 19th, 2018, would now mark the end of his 4-decade run of freedom. News of the arrest broke the next day, sending shockwaves, especially through those who remembered the case. Cedar Rapids Police Chief Wayne German announced that a suspect was in custody thanks to modern DNA technology, similar to what caught the Golden State Killer. In the press conference, Chief German explained that a covert DNA sample from the suspect had matched blood evidence from 1979. For the Cedar Rapids community, it was a long-awaited headline that they really thought might never come. Arrest made in 1979 Martinko murder.
I mean, I hate that it took 4 decades for that to happen, but I'm glad that we have the technology now to actually find these people. And
it's pretty crazy because, I mean, I don't even...
Yeah, just hanging on to it, hoping for something in the future.
As police led Jerry Burns, now in handcuffs, from his workplace, he still maintained this kind of stony facade. He continued to deny killing Michelle, kind of, but tellingly, he still could not provide any plausible reason why his DNA was mingled with the blood of Michelle. The arrest and the facts astonished everyone who knew the Martinko story. Janelle Stonebreaker, Michelle's sister, got the phone call informing her of the arrest and was overcome with emotion. She and her husband John had moved to Florida by then, but of course they thought about Michelle every day. Janelle admitted, "We really had given up hope. We had." And when they heard the news, she said, "We were just whooping and hollering. We were so excited. After 39 years of darkness, there was finally a light." For the Burns family, however, the news was a nightmare. Jerry's relatives were utterly blindsided. His daughter Jennifer and his brother Don both insisted the police must have the wrong man. This cannot be our dad, Jennifer said, incredulous about the loving father she knew and that he could be accused of such a horrific crime.
It's awful for his family, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You would never, ever expect that.
No.
Especially because they lost their mom, too, and their dad was like there for them and stuff. And then just, it would almost feel like a betrayal, I think.
That is a great word for it. I think that's exactly how it would feel. Don Burns echoed Jennifer's statements. He said he couldn't have done it. There's just no way. He was always there for his family. The Burns family closed ranks around Jerry, attending every court hearing en masse to show support. To them, Jerry was a good man incapable of murder. And it's easy to understand their disbelief. For 39 years, nothing in Jerry's outward life linked him to violence or to Michelle. After his arrest, Jerry quickly obtained a high-profile defense attorney, Leon Spies. Spies wasted no time in mounting challenges. He entered a plea of not guilty on Jerry's behalf in January 2019, setting the stage for a court battle. Spies also filed motions to suppress basically all the key evidence. They wanted to suppress the DNA gathered from the straw, arguing that it was an unlawful search. It's not. The genealogical DNA analysis via GEDmatch, arguing it was done without a proper warrant, and even Jerry's own statements during the police interrogation, arguing that his rights were violated. They were ambitious motions. They were essentially trying to get the heart of the case thrown out. In the pretrial hearings, Burns himself took the stand once, not to confess, but to bolster his claim that he didn't understand what was happening during the interrogation. He claimed he was unfamiliar with police questioning procedures and that his right to an attorney, quote, wasn't adequately explained to him. The judge, however, was not swayed. In the weeks leading up to the trial, the court ruled that the discarded DNA from the straw was lawfully obtained and could be used at trial. He also ruled the genetic genealogy analysis was allowed. The judge did throw the defense a small bone on another matter. The prosecution had dug up extremely disturbing evidence from Burns's computer and internet history, which they felt suggested a motive or at least a violent mindset. Specifically, investigators had discovered that Burns had conducted internet searches on his work computer for things like, and this is rough, blonde female rape strangulation and murder of a deceased individual, rape and abuse of a corpse, and even cannibalism.
Oh.
Yeah.
But
It's disturbing.
Yes.
they say they can't admit that, but a work computer, there's basically an agreement that anything on the work computer is property of the
And maybe
workplace.
because it was his own company.
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
I guess that could be true, but
Or if they didn't have a warrant before they looked at it. But I would think you would know that you had to. But I could also see it being so far after the crime took place.
yeah,
The judge saying it's not relevant, maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, not relevant to the case specifically, but
Relevant. to
still
his
probably
mindset.
relevant.
I mean, Michelle was blonde. So that first one kind of correlates.
Yeah.
Judge Faye Hoover ruled in early 2020 that this internet search history could not be introduced at trial on the grounds that it was too prejudicial and not sufficiently directly tied to the crime. In other words, the jury would not hear about Burns' late night macabre Googling. This was a setback for the prosecution's narrative of motive, but a relief for the defense. One other pretrial issue was the venue. Given the extensive local publicity in Cedar Rapids, both sides agreed it would be hard to seat an unbiased jury there. The judge approved moving the trial to Scott County in Davenport, Iowa, which was about an hour away, to try to get a fresh jury pool. By early 2020, everything was in place for what would be one of Iowa's most consequential cold case trials. The trial opened in Davenport, Iowa in February 2020. Michelle's family and friends packed one side of the courtroom. Michelle's sister Janelle and her brother-in-law John, their children, cousins, they had all flown up from Florida and they attended every single day of the trial.
I definitely would.
I would too.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, the Burns family was also there in force. Jerry's relatives filled the benches daily, standing by the man they loved despite these horrific allegations. It was emotionally charged, but oddly civil. At one point, John Stonebreaker, who was Michelle's sister's husband, remarked that they weren't planning a big celebration, even if they got a conviction, out of respect that, quote, the Burns family is experiencing its own pain and heartbreak through this ordeal. Prosecutor Nick Maybanks, the first assistant Lynn County attorney, led the case for the state. From the onset, Maybanks acknowledged the challenge. No one had witnessed the murder, and for decades, no one even suspected Jerry Burns. This was going to be a case built on forensic evidence and circumstantial threads. In his opening statement, Maybanks promised the jury that the evidence would show Michelle Martinko was murdered that night by the defendant, Jerry Burns. He laid out a story of a chance encounter between two strangers that turned deadly. Throughout the trial, Maybanks painted a narrative of Michelle's last night alive, intertwining it with where Jerry supposedly fit into the picture. He started with Michelle at the choir banquet, then going to the mall, which we all know was factual and what can be proven. Then he introduced Burns into the timeline. Jerry Burns, then a 25-year-old man, was also at Westdale Mall that night, possibly doing some Christmas shopping alone. Burns had admitted in his police interview that he used to shop at that mall with family, though he claimed not to recall being there on that specific night. The prosecution suggested that at some point that evening, Burns spotted Michelle in the mall. Maybe he noticed the pretty blonde teen chatting with friends or walking by herself. Maybanks argued that Burns saw Michelle in the mall later alone and decided to follow her. He painted the picture of two paths converging, Michelle walking to her car, unaware that Burns was trailing her in the shadows.
Oh, I don't like that.
No, I don't either. According to Maybanks' narrative, Jerry Burns waited for the right moment to strike. Michelle likely reached her car and opened the driver's door to get in. At that instant, with the parking lot otherwise empty and dark, Burns made his move. He said the killer had to act fast before she drove away. He theorized that Burns quickly opened the car door, perhaps the passenger side if she had already closed hers, or yanked open the driver's door before she could lock it. Evidence showed Michelle had been struck on the head with a blunt object, possibly the butt end of a knife, which likely happened right at the start of the attack. He opened her car door and struck her head with the knife handle, Maybanks described. Michelle fell or was shoved backwards across the front seat. He held her down as she started to fight, the prosecutor continued, emphasizing the ferocity of the struggle. Her fear and terror kicks in, he said, having the jury imagine the panic and adrenaline that must have flooded Michelle as a stranger attacked her in the darkness. Maybanks then walked the jury through the gruesome details of Michelle's wounds one by one. The medical examiner, Dr. Richard Feister, testified about the autopsy findings. 29 separate stab or cut wounds concentrated on her face, neck, and chest. The fatal stab to the sternum was highlighted, with Dr. Feister explaining how it punctured the aorta and caused massive internal bleeding. One news report summarized saying, Maybanks says Burns stabbed Martinko over and over and over, leaving her with 29 sharp-edged wounds. He even punctuated the description by pounding on the podium for dramatic effect, stating the amount of force required to inflict these wounds was significant. One can imagine the jurors flinching as each blow was recounted. Crucially, Maybanks argued that the nature of the attack showed premeditation and intent to kill, hallmarks of first-degree murder. The fact that the killer wore gloves, because remember, no fingerprints were left at the scene, was evidence of planning and deliberation, he said. The killer came prepared not to leave prints. Also, I would think going to the mall with a knife like that maybe isn't great either.
Yeah.
A knife, and if he had gloves?
I could see, though, I mean, it's Iowa and it's towards the end of December. It might not have been like latex gloves like we're picturing.
No, they probably were like wool gloves
winter
or whatever.
gloves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He probably could have even picked the knife up at the mall if he didn't bring it with him.
Yeah.
That's true too. Yeah.
Or if he had it in his car, if he hunting or anything like that.
Stopped there first on his way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If he had gone out and was like in the parking lot by his car, in his car, and he saw her walk past, could have grabbed his stuff and followed her.
That's true too. I wish we knew exactly how it went. Like, I wish he would have
confessed.
Yeah.
Exactly. You've already been caught.
I know.
Tell us why and how. And
yes.
Yeah. What was that thought process there?
Yeah.
Was there
clear conscience?
Yeah.
I almost feel like, because that one person who worked at the mall said that they saw someone around 3 a.m., right?
Yeah.
I almost wonder, like, from his search history, if he was planning to do more to her and tried to come back and saw that there were still people at the mall and ran off.
That's very possible.
Makes me sad.
Yeah. I know. I hate that. On the flip side, the killer clearly hadn't planned on leaving blood, but Burns, according to the state, did cut himself during the struggle. Maybanks pointed out that Burns' own blood was left behind unbeknownst to him. And also, DNA was not a thing in 1979, so the killer likely never imagined the mistake would come back to haunt him. In a particularly theatrical line, Maybanks told the jury he was no doubt haunted by the knock on the door that would eventually come, albeit 39 years later.
I hope so. I hope he was worried about it for 39 years.
Me too. Every time the knock came on the door.
Every time he saw a cop car.
Well, and every time he saw like a case in the news where, you know, these cold cases, DNA, I wonder if he ever got worried about that too, you know?
I wonder if he had convinced himself that they hadn't saved anything or they couldn't test it that long later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you would probably have to manage day to day.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Maybanks suggested the only way that Burns managed to live with himself was by, quote, blocking out his memories of that night. And this comment cleverly tied in Burns' own words about blocking things out, turning the suspect's quasi-excuse into an implied confession of guilt. It was a neat bit of narrative jiu-jitsu by the prosecution. Burns said maybe he blocked it out. The prosecutor spun that as he had to block it out just to cope with what he'd done for 39 years. Of course, the centerpiece of the state's case was the DNA evidence. Multiple forensic experts from the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, abbreviated DCI, crime lab, testified about extracting the male DNA profile from Michelle's dress and the car gear shift, and how it was linked to Jerry Burns with effectively absolute certainty. The probability of a random, unrelated person having the same profile was quoted as less than 1 in 100 billion, a number that boggles the mind. And for context, the world population is under 8 billion. In short, the blood at the crime scene belonged to Jerry Burns and no one else. The jury got to hear how investigators collected Burns' straw and how the lab compared it to the 1979 blood samples. I'm sure it was fascinating for the jurors to learn the detective work behind that.
We think it's pretty interesting.
Yes, it is.
I was like, wow.
I know. I mean, I hate these cases because justice goes so long without being served, but the science behind them is fascinating.
Even her parents weren't alive, right? They passed before they found out.
Yeah.
But it's so cool that they are able to solve these cases and finally get justice, even if it is
a long
time.
Yeah.
It's better than not. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, and who knows? I mean, he hasn't done anything since then, but what's to say he won't?
What's to say he hasn't?
Yeah, maybe he didn't get caught another time.
Yeah.
We'll actually circle back to that.
Okay. Interesting.
You're ahead of the game, Laura.
Yep. Prosecutor Maybanks also highlighted Burns' own bizarre behavior and statements. He reminded the jury that during the police interview, when confronted with the DNA evidence, Burns never once said, "I didn't do it." In fact, Maybanks, in his closing arguments, hammered this point home. Folks, That's a yes or no. Did you murder someone that night? Test the DNA, Burns said. Guess what? We did. And it's Jerry Burns' DNA. This argument was powerful in its simplicity. Innocent people, when accused, usually protest loudly. Burns basically shrugged and said, go test it. And when they did, it obviously came back to him. Silence or evasiveness in the face of such an accusation, Maybank suggested, spoke volumes.
I wonder if he thought they didn't actually have his DNA. Maybe he didn't remember getting cut or something.
Mm-hmm.
Was trying to call their bluff or whatever.
Thought they hadn't saved it, something. Yeah. But it's like, how would have they found you then? There were no witnesses. Yep. They never found the murder weapon.
There was no tie. Like,
no, they didn't know each other that they could find. So,
yeah,
bad bluff to call.
Yeah, seriously.
Additionally, the prosecution introduced some jailhouse evidence that added a twist of irony. A former Lynn County Jail inmate named Michael, who bunked with Burns after his arrest, testified that Burns made some telling remarks while in custody. According to Michael, Jerry Burns made a comment about taking him to the mall, an eerie phrase that Michael interpreted as a threat or reference to the crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like it.
Are like,
yeah. Even more oddly, Michael said Burns autographed a photo of himself in handcuffs for Michael. I'm not sure why someone would want a murder suspect's autograph, but it happened.
That's bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The prosecution suggested that Burns signing a photo in handcuffs and making cryptic statements could be seen as veiled admissions or at least flaunting the situation. It's reported that Burns even lamented to his cellmate that DNA wasn't a thing back then, essentially expressing regret that technology had advanced enough to catch him. If true, that statement is chilling. It's not something an innocent man would say, but exactly what a guilty man who got away with it for years would say when finally caught by DNA.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right? They wanted the jury to hear that Burns himself knew DNA was his downfall. The defense, of course, attacked Michael's credibility. He was, after all, an incarcerated individual with his own criminal history, possibly looking for favors by providing info. Defense attorney Leon Spies cast Michael as a master manipulator who orchestrated a setup to incriminate Burns. They even showed a jail video clip suggesting that Michael coaxed Burns into signing the photo, implying it was less an act of hubris from Burns and more of a cunning trap by a jailhouse snitch. Spies said, pointing and nodding with approval, this men and women of the jury was a setup. The defense argument, don't trust the jail informant. He's just trying to help himself by framing Jerry with exaggerated or false claims.
Pretty sure the DNA already did that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. With the prosecution's case built on science and an outline of motive opportunity, the defense faced an uphill battle. Spies is a skilled attorney, and he focused on two main strategies: suggest an innocent explanation for the DNA and cast doubt about the integrity of the evidence handling over 40 years. First, Spies conceded that the DNA on Michelle's dress and gear shift did belong to Burns. That was not really disputable by any conventional means. Instead, he put forth an alternative theory of how it got there: secondary transfer. In simple terms, he argued that Burns's DNA might have been innocently transferred to Michelle's dress through some intermediary object or person, rather than from direct contact during a murder. He said the people we touch, the things that touch us, are all transmitters of DNA.
So he's saying that Jerry bled on somebody else who then went and killed Michelle and put his blood in her car.
I think he's even trying to make them forget that it was blood and just saying like DNA. He touched yeah, exactly.
Well, he got a hair on someone and that hair ended up in her car.
Right.
That's not what
that's what they're linking it to.
And I could say too, if it was only on her dress, like, oh, his hand was cut and they bumped into each other in the mall. But It's in her car too.
Yeah, being on the gear shift is much different.
And if she had enough on her dress to smear on the... Okay. Why isn't he saying that?
Yeah,
oh, I had cut myself and I bled on her.
Right.
Or even just, I cut myself at the mall and, had
Yeah.
or something.
So,
I mean, you had 39 years to explain it.
yeah. You have nothing.
Pretty crazy.
I think if that had happened, he would have been thinking about that for 39 years. Like, oh, if they ever come to me, I have to remember this. He saw she died.
Right. And so you were there that night. You know you were there. Go tell them that right away.
I was bleeding all over. I had a serious accident.
Yes.
I promise.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't me.
But that's not what happened.
Nope. The defense suggested that Jerry had unknowingly touched something at the mall, like a countertop or a door handle, and then Michelle touched the same surface, picking up teeny bits of his DNA.
Sure. And then got it all over her dress in the gear shift.
Enough blood that it wasn't dried by the time she got to her car, that it was able to smear on her car too.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Math isn't mathing.
No. It's so far-fetched to just think that it was some innocent cross-contamination with nothing backing it up, no actual story. Like you just said, like that is a better defense than what they're saying.
Yeah.
Because like I said, they're not even addressing the blood. They're just saying he touched the door handle and she touched it. Okay, but it's blood on her dress and in her car.
I'm going to say this. If I touched a door handle and came back and there was blood on my hand, I would immediately be washing that hand.
Yes, of course.
That is disgusting.
Or if someone bled all over your dress.
Yeah.
Like you're going to go in the bathroom and try and rinse it off a little bit.
Right.
Best you can.
I mean, I could understand that the blood might still be there if it got on her dress, but if it was on her hand, there's no way she's walking around with someone else's blood on her hand. There's just no way.
And you're talking about the possibility that happened and then she's murdered with a knife, showing defensive wounds. So she was fighting back, which usually cuts the perpetrator.
I would say the only way that could make sense as an argument is if there was multiple different things of blood at the scene.
Yes.
If there's only one.
Literally only one compared to her.
It's very common when
a knife attack.
Yeah, a knife attack for their murderer to actually cut themselves too, especially if you're stabbing someone 29 times.
Well, and if she's fighting back too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it gets there.
Yeah.
Which is why it's there.
Yes.
It's absolutely a far-fetched scenario, but I imagine that Spies felt like he only needed to convince one juror that it was reasonable enough to create reasonable doubt, I guess.
Yeah.
Next up, the defense attacked the chain of custody and the preservation of evidence. They said after 40 years, was it possible that mistakes had been made that could mix up or contaminate samples, which would make more sense if he'd ever been arrested and had evidence.
Right. Or if he'd worked in that department.
But no, none of those.
Like, oh, yes, they accidentally mixed it up.
Like, how would they have your sample?
Guy. He's never done anything wrong before.
How would they have his blood sample?
Right.
So the defense zeroed in on an old evidence tag on the bag containing Michelle's dress. He pointed out that the tag, which bore the signature of a police evidence officer, had an irregularity. The signature, belonging to Officer Dick White, didn't look like his usual signature, and a date on the tag had been scribbled out and changed. So Spies argued that this could indicate that the dress had not been properly sealed or was maybe even unbagged for some period of time early on in the investigation. If the dress had been handled improperly or left exposed, who knows whose DNA might have ended up on it. He's trying to say cross-contamination was a real possibility.
But then it wouldn't have matched his DNA anyway, right?
And, I mean, it could have. I think he's saying like a police officer put Burns's blood on it or something. But how would he have gotten it?
Yeah. Why would he have even been a person of interest for them to even do that?
And also, pretty much right away, they found that there were two separate blood types on there.
Yeah.
someone's was on there and we're not finding 3.
Yep.
Pretty wild.
Trying really hard there.
Yeah.
I guess that's his job.
I guess when you have nothing else and it specifically matches your client, you got to come up with whatever you can.
Yep.
I guess that is their job.
Yeah.
Spies also noted evidence that was never tested. This was interesting and might have made the jurors' ears perk up. For instance, the scarf that Michelle was wearing, which was around her neck at the crime scene, had apparently never been tested for DNA. Why not? He insinuated. Perhaps because it might have shown DNA from someone else. But again, at the time, they didn't have DNA. So, furthermore, spies highlighted that a sample of sperm was found on Michelle's underwear. And shockingly, it also had never, I repeat, never been tested.
Seriously?
He said, yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting.
I agree. That's maybe his only point that I could see.
Mm-hmm.
The revelation was a bombshell, and finding semen suggests sexual activity. And if it wasn't from Burns, whose DNA profile they had, it implies another male's DNA was present. There is, in fact, evidence of another male at this crime scene, he said, arguing to the jury and trying really hard to hammer in that point. The prosecution hadn't mentioned this at all, likely because they believed it was unrelated or contamination, which now you're proving the defense's side. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
But at the time, like we said, they didn't have full DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So with the blood type, they can test the blood type.
Right.
But other forms of DNA, did they even have a way to test those at that time?
No.
So it wouldn't have made sense for them to hold on to that because there was nothing they could do with it. But the blood samples, they could.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And I don't know why they didn't test the scarf.
Yeah, that's weird to me too.
Yeah. The prosecution was saying that maybe the sperm sample, by the time they could test it, was too degraded to test. But the defense used the absence of information to their advantage. Maybe the real killer was someone else and that untested DNA could belong to him. You're still not addressing how his blood got in her car.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Just planting doubt.
Exactly.
Right. And that's what they need.
Yeah.
Reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm. So the jurors were left to wonder if Jerry Burns was the killer whose DNA, if indeed some existed, was on that untested underwear. And that did plant a seed of doubt. Could the investigators have missed the real perpetrator? So in essence, the defense was saying, yes, Jerry's DNA was there, but it got there by accident. And maybe someone else's DNA was there too, but police never bothered to check. So classic reasonable doubt approach. They're not offering a clear alternative suspect, but they are trying to muddy the waters just enough. Additionally, the defense revisited Burns' odd interrogation behavior, trying to spin it in a less damning light. He suggested that Jerry's stunned, evasive responses to the DNA news were not sinister, but human. He said, I challenge anybody to predict how any person is going to react, let alone when caught out of the blue with an investigator trying to attribute them to a horrible, horrible crime. So the implication, Burns' failure to deny wasn't an admission. He was just shell-shocked and confused. He did not commit this murder, spies maintained. Throughout the trial, each side presented experts and witnesses to bolster these narratives. The state called rebuttal witnesses from the DCI lab to strongly deny that any contamination occurred in handling the evidence. This criminologist explained that the lab had meticulous protocols and integrity of the samples, and their handling was solid. And in fact, when defense witness, a DNA expert named Spence, insinuated contamination, the prosecution's rebuttal aimed to thoroughly debunk that. At one point, the defense even objected during the rebuttal and moved for a mistrial, explaining the prosecutor's question about Burns' blood was improper. The judge disagreed. After about 2 weeks of testimony, closing arguments were delivered on February 24th, 2020. Mae Banks, in summation, drove home the key points. Jerry Burns had been a 25-year-old man in 1979 who likely went to the mall that night with predatory intent. He described it as a premeditated act Burns arming himself with a knife, making sure he had gloves. He said he spotted Michelle, followed her, and struck before she could escape. Maybanks reminded the jury of Burns' own incriminating words and lack of denial. He even referenced the chilling tidbit of Burns lamenting DNA advances to a cellmate. He said he later would lament that DNA wasn't a thing back then. In a reflective moment, Maybanks commented to the jury, "People can be different things, capable of loving and wonderful things, and capable of sordid and cruel acts." Jerry Burns might seem like a decent family man, Maybanks acknowledged, but that didn't mean he couldn't also be a murderer. It was a point aimed at helping jurors reconcile the two images of Burns: upstanding citizen versus brutal killer. As he put it in closing, "That's why I said people can be different things. Some are capable of sordid and cruel acts." So, in other words, the absence of an obvious motive or criminal history doesn't equal innocence. For the defense, Spy's closing argument urged jurors to remain skeptical. He methodically reviewed how evidence was handled over the decades, waving those inconsistencies in front of them: the funky evidence tag signature, the untested scarf and underwear, etc. He suggested that if the police didn't test everything or didn't preserve things perfectly, they shouldn't get the benefit of the doubt now. Spy's, quote, tried to put doubt in the jurors' minds about how the evidence was mishandled and suggested that there could have been cross-contamination. He implored the jury not to convict if they had even a reasonable doubt that something wasn't right with the forensic picture. Spies likely hammered on the theme that the state has not proven why or how Jerry's DNA got there, only that it's there. I think they said why and how it got there.
Isn't that the point of the trial? It was there because he murdered her? That's okay.
Yep. After closing arguments, the case went to the 12 jurors. They had 7 women and 5 men for deliberation at around 1 p.m. on February 24th. In a cold case trial with 40 years of history, one might expect lengthy deliberations, but that wasn't the case here. The evidence and perhaps Jerry Burns' own demeanor had spoken loudly. In less than 3 hours, they reached a decision.
Wow.
Shortly before 4 p.m., they returned to the courtroom. The atmosphere was tense. Family members on both sides held their breath. The verdict was read: guilty of first-degree murder. Jerry Burns himself showed little outward emotion as the verdict was read. No dramatic outbursts or tears. He had sat through the trial mostly impassive, sometimes jotting notes or whispering with his lawyer. Now convicted at age 66, he faced mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole. And like most states, Iowa mandates life for first-degree murder. Sentencing was set for a later date, but it's just a formality. The judge doesn't even have discretion on the terms. In August 2020, Burns received life in prison. Even after conviction, Burns maintained his innocence. His defense attorney filed appeals, arguing primarily that the DNA evidence should have been suppressed. He contended that collecting DNA from the straw and uploading the profile to GEDmatch without a warrant violated Burns' Fourth Amendment rights. This was a novel legal question, as genetic genealogy was still fairly new. The case, State v. Burns, went up to the Iowa Supreme Court, and in March 2023, the court affirmed the conviction. The justices ruled that the DNA on the straw was abandoned property. Once Burns left it behind at the restaurant, he had no reasonable expectation of privacy, so no warrant was needed. They also found the use of GEDmatch lawful and that the evidence was more than sufficient to support the jury's verdict. In short, Jerry Burns isn't going anywhere. He remains in an Iowa penitentiary effectively for the rest of his life. So I said we'd come back to the other things. He is being looked at for his wife's death.
Oh.
And also the death of a cousin in 2012.
Oh,
interesting.
So I haven't been able to find many case updates on that, but they've got some digging going on both of those.
interesting. Oh. Yeah, we're related, guys.
That was a 3 for 3. Yes.
Yeah. So there could be other things out there. And I also read that they are trying his DNA against other unsolved cases at the time, maybe ones that haven't had the genealogy done or the full DNA profile, especially ones that are smaller amounts of DNA, because sometimes you can't test them again and you might come back inconclusive, like Patty's case, which I look every day for an update for, and there isn't. But anyways, so maybe we'll have a follow-up to this eventually.
Maybe there's more.
Maybe. Yeah. It always just blows my mind that you could do that once and then never again.
Yeah.
Well, and that might not even been the first time.
Right.
That could have been older cases.
He was 25. Yeah. So.
And he, if he had a knife and he knew to wear gloves.
He knew to wait until she was alone in the parking lot at night.
There definitely could be older cases too that we don't know about.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that. But
that's really interesting.
So far, nothing concrete. But I don't feel bad saying it because he is convicted of murder.
Yeah.
In conclusion, more than 40 years after a bright young woman was slain, justice finally caught up with the killer. The Michelle Martinko case stands as just a remarkable example of persistence and technological progress in solving cold cases. It took improvements in DNA science, from basic profiling to phenotyping to genealogical matching, and incredible dedication of investigators across generations. Michelle's own fight for her life turned out to be pivotal. By inflicting a wound on her attacker and causing him to bleed, she secured the evidence that would one day solve her murder. As one headline fittingly put it, this young murder victim helped solve her own cold case. In the end, Michelle's case is a story of justice delayed but not denied. It's the story of how tiny drops of blood and the will of investigators spanned 40 years to catch a killer. It's also a reminder that monsters can hide in plain sight, sometimes for decades, leading ordinary lives while hiding terrible secrets. I think perhaps our biggest takeaway is one of hope for other cold cases. As science advances, no matter how much time has passed, there is always a chance that truth will emerge. You guys see?
Especially now as we get more technologically evolved. We're going to probably solve a lot more cases.
I think so. And I am here for it.
Hope so too.
We need justice for these cases.
Yes, we do.
People getting away with stuff for 40 years is not fair.
It's not. You get to live your whole life.
And she didn't.
Yeah.
Cut way too short.
I had wanted to see like a picture of her just so that
she's
and him.
Really pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he looks like a normal old guy.
Yeah.
Just like,
I hate that.
So normal.
Hopefully, if there is something with his, one of those other cases you mentioned, maybe his computer search history will be relevant in that.
Yeah.
Entirely possible.
Who
Especially
knows?
if it was along the same time.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Did you already say if the other two cases were both also women?
Yeah,
his wife.
Right, his wife and then the cousin. Was that a female?
I think his cousin was male.
Okay.
Did you see that it was female? Am I forgetting?
No.
You just said a cousin.
Okay.
You didn't say.
Yeah.
I that's also what I was looking up too. I was curious the status of those cases.
Yeah.
But I didn't see anything about that. No. I just
haven't found
saw
anything either.
The latest article that I saw was from 2023.
Yeah, it's been a minute. When I was looking, I was wondering if maybe his cousin knew something
about
the wife
or Michelle. But you're probably right about the wife. I was thinking about Michelle, but yeah.
Did his wife die?
2008.
Yeah.
How?
They said by suicide.
All I saw was, by suicide. All right, I'll wrap this up. I want you to keep looking because I want if you find anything. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Crime Clueless. We truly appreciate you spending your time with us. If you're looking for the resources or more information about this case, you can head to our blog. You can find it linked in the show notes. Don't forget, we love to hear what you think about these cases. Interact with us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, etc. We're on all of them at Crime Clueless. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear any theories, feedback, anything. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love if you take a minute to rate, review, and share our podcast. Your support helps us reach more listeners and grow our community. You can find Crime Clueless on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and all major streaming platforms. Remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murderers.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.